When we hear the name George Washington, I think a number of things come to mind. Certainly we think about our childhood when we went to school in grade school and learned about George Washington being a founding father of our nation, certainly being the first president of the United States. But Native people, but specifically the Haudenosaunee, think about George Washington in different ways, in different terms. This is a letter that a Seneca individual, Seneca leader, wrote to George Washington on December 1st, 1790. George Washington had only been our president for a short period of time, a year or two, by the time that Cornplanter had written this letter. And oftentimes what we see in American Indian history is specific, especially after these great battles and these wars, Native people are looking at the situation that they're finding themselves in, and they're having to make very strategic and I think political decisions, including going to powerful leaders such as George Washington, being the President of the United States, and pleading with him, reminding Washington about agreements or understandings that they had had with him in the past. And by the time you get to 1790, there was just a tremendous amount of upheaval that had taken place up to this time. The native nations of the Haudenosaunee, a number of their villages had been destroyed as a result of the Sullivan campaign. And so Cornplanter writes him, and he says this, he says, "When your army entered the county of the Six Nations, we called you town destroyer. When the name is heard, our women look behind them and turn pale, and our children cling close to the neck of their mothers." This was a term that the Seneca and others of the Six Nations used for George Washington. That was a name that they had given him. It wasn't the first time that these Native nations had given that name to a member of the Washington family. In fact, George Washington's great-grandfather, John Washington, had also had a reputation among the Haudenosaunee as being a town destroyer, specifically in the late 1600s. And so by the time we get to 1790s, almost 100 years later, the Seneca people, the Haudenosaunee, they are reminding Washington of his own family's past. They're reminding him of that. And they are saying that just as we called your great-grandfather the town destroyer, or the Kanatokarius, the town destroyer, we are using that same name with you. And so today we think of George Washington in certain ways. He's at the face of our quarter. We see his image all over the place in our schools. There's another side of George Washington that I think is important for us to know. And it's the side of him as a general. Remember, commanding his soldiers to burn some 40 villages in the Haudenosaunee territory, continuing that pattern of violence that first started in his own family with his grandfather. And that name stuck with him. And the people reminded him of that history that he carried with him in his own family.